Hi, good morning, everyone, wherever you might be joining us from. My name is Duncan Cave, and I'm from the Think City Institute. And today our webinar is to mark the official launch of a collaboration between the Getty Conservation Institute and Think City, and that collaboration is Old Cities New Challenges 2021. Now, this is the second time we're hosting the course, but it's actually the fifth time since 2012 that the Getty and Think City have worked together to deliver urban conservation planning courses. Now, the format for our webinar today will be two short presentations followed by a moderated Q&A session, which will give you all a chance to ask questions of our speakers. And our speakers today are Janet Pillai, who's based here in Malaysia, who will be looking at conservation challenges in Penang, and Yongtanit Pimonsathean, who's joining us from Thailand, and he's going to be looking at Phuket Old Town as a case study. Before we push on, a couple of housekeeping items. Firstly, please do join the conversation. You'll see the chat box on the right side of the screen. Say hello, let us know where you're tuning in from, and ask questions here. And remember that the earlier that you ask your questions, the better chance you have of getting them answered. The second bit of housekeeping is about connection. If you're finding it a little unstable, click the reconnect button that you can see at the top of your screen. And if you continue to have problems, then what you should do is reload your browser and you'll be brought straight back into the room. Now, I'm going to be back at the end of the session to let you know more about the course and how you might apply. And those of you listening in now are getting advanced access to the application form, so stay until the end to make sure that you get that. Now, I'd like to hand over to someone I've worked with for the past 8 years or so, my colleague and close friend, Jeff Cody. Jeff is a senior project specialist at the Getty Conservation Institute in Los Angeles. He was trained as a historic preservation planner and an architectural historian, and he's taught at Cornell University and then at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, where he also served on the Hong Kong government's Antiquities Advisory Board. And during his time there, Jeff traveled extensively in the region, conducting a lot of architectural research in China. He's been with the Getty Conservation Institute since 2004, supervising several kinds of conservation training activities here in Southeast Asia, including courses for archaeologists in Laos and Thailand, as well as these courses with Think City. The Getty recently published an anthology of excerpted readings about urban conservation that Jeff co-edited, entitled Historic Cities, Issues in Urban Conservation. Jeff, wonderful to see you again. Thanks for joining us from Los Angeles. Welcome back to Malaysia, even if it is just virtually.
Well, thank you very much, Duncan. I wish it was actually there, despite the challenges that I know you're all facing with COVID. We certainly are facing our own challenges here, but it's really wonderful that with this technology, we can all be together. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I'll leave it over to you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to send my warm greetings to all of you, and thank you very much for your interest in our Old Cities New Challenges course. My introduction is just going to be a couple of minutes here, but I begin with this group photo from the last time we offered the course in Georgetown in 2018, when we were able to meet, obviously, in person. You can see our participants here, as well as our instructional team of 8 instructors. I want to hopefully you can see that many of the people in this photo are smiling, and that they're also mixed, the participants with the instructors. And I just want to use this photo to remind you that this close interaction between instructors and participants is really one of the course's key characteristics. In 2021, obviously, we've needed to re-engineer this course in a digital format, but we have retained this highly interactive atmosphere between our diverse international instructional team and the participants, some of whom I hope might be listening to this right now. During the in-person course, participants worked both individually sometimes, but also frequently in small groups, as you see here. In the newly formulated course that we're planning for the fall, participants will also work on their own sometimes, accessing a series of pre-recorded PowerPoints each week. roughly for about an hour and a half of viewing time. But there will be also a live session on Saturday mornings, roughly this time of day for you in Southeast Asia, when many instructors will be online to answer your questions and to lead small group discussions. In the in-person version of the course, we all worked quite intensively for 8 days. But in the online version, roughly 1 day of the in-person material is roughly 1 week in the virtual world that we'll be inhabiting in the fall. In previous Old Cities, New Challenges courses, we used a field site for exercises. You see here one of our participants getting very close to the physical fabric of a historic wall. But in the online version of the course, participants will choose their own small historic neighborhood in their home cities as their exercise site. Instructors will regularly assign short exercises that participants will complete and submit for feedback. Here you see one of our instructors in the white hat on the right, Liz Vines from Australia, teaching at the site. In our redesign course, instructors will be just as close to you and your questions, but it will obviously be in a virtual familiarity and not obviously with you like that. However, the intimacy between you and the teaching team will be preserved. That intimacy and direct involvement with the participants is shown here as Janet Pillai, who you'll meet in just a moment, helps participants understand the importance of cultural mapping. The Old Cities, New Challenges course will teach you about internationally recognized conservation methods, for example, the historic urban landscape approach. The course will also help you understand what sustainable development goals are and how they should complement concerns for conserving historic urban areas in Southeast Asia. The course will feature the experience of a really wonderful group of instructors who are also professionals, either as architects, a planner, a sociologist, and a heritage economics specialist. We're all anxious to work together again as a team. So please consider joining us. Past experience demonstrates that you will learn a lot, you'll work a lot, and you will make many wonderful new friends as new professional networks also get started. So I'd like to now introduce the first speaker, my good friend and fellow teacher in the course, Janet Pillai. Janet, can we see you logging in? There we go. Janet currently works as an independent consultant advocating for community engagement and cultural sustainability. Her special areas of interest include cultural mapping, that you're going to hear about in a minute, and cultural heritage education. Janet works on community engaged projects in either partnership or in consultation with communities, local agencies, institutions, and professionals. She's led several cultural mapping projects in Penang, in Butterworth, and in Pulau Tikus in Malaysia. And she's authored 5 books, one of them being Cultural Mapping, A Guide to Understanding Place, Community, and Continuity. She is also sometimes teaches in the University of Hong Kong's Architectural Conservation Program and contributes as an expert resource person in regional organizations. And then I want to end this by saying Janet is also one of the most talented and committed teachers that I've ever had the pleasure to work with. So Janet, please take it away. Thank you.
Sorry, Janet, you need to turn on your microphone. We can't hear you.
Hello? Is that all right?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay, thank you, Jeff, and welcome everyone, all those listeners out there. For the first case study, I thought I would focus on the old heritage inner city of Georgetown, located on the island of Penang, which is to the west coast of peninsular Malaysia, just below Thailand. I'm sure many of you have heard about the Georgetown Malacca World Heritage Site. So just let me give you some background on this town. So it was established in 1786 as a port, actually a late port. There were many other ports that were established in the region. You can see the red dots there. And most of these grew out of a sea trade route between the east and the west. And it was the British East India Company actually that through which the island was secured with the intention of opening a port that would service east-west trade for Britain during the industrial era. And this trade became quite large later when the country was colonized, and it acted as an entrepot for Britain. But from the very beginning, Captain Francis Light, who set up the port, invited traders and investors from both the local region, Asian region, as well as from the West. So Europe, China, India, Burma, small, traders and investors settled and grew the port. Later, when it became an entrepot, a lot of indentured labor was brought in to service the port activity, and that added even more to the multicultural makeup of this port town. So the port town is made up of several ethnocultural precincts within this very small area. So we can see a little map down on the right, how tiny the area is, and there's a kind of a grid-shaped city within which there are several precincts with very distinct ethnocultural settlements within it. Now, because of this distinct multicultural character of the old inner city of Georgetown, it was given it attained the status of World Heritage Site in the year 2008. And actually the settlements and the ethnocultural community carried on quite a bit, or inherited the legacy of port activities and carried on the trades and economic livelihoods that they had inherited. But more interestingly, many of these settlers actually maintain very strong ties with their ancestral motherlands. So this was one of the reasons for a rather lively cultural, transmission that continued for many, many years, which added to the very strong cultural character of this town. And although there was some transformation, via mixed marriage and modernization, still the cultural legacies were very strongly protected by the various communities. But maybe to a certain extent based on pride, to a certain extent based on just social ties, and also delivery of goods and services to the various cultural groups from the motherland, and also maintaining, certain artisanal kind of activities as well. So the site was actually given a cultural designation, and among the three major outstanding universal values was that it was considered a historic multicultural trading town, testimony of multicultural living heritage, which was quite strong still quite strong in 2008, and of course the unique townscape and multicultural architecture that was found within the ethnocultural settlements. And the area, as you can see here, is this little cape with the core zone marked out and the buffer zone as well. Now, there was a lot of excitement when we first got this World Heritage Site, but I think little did the authorities and conservationists and also NGOs that were involved in the designation, little did they realize that there were going to be so many challenges, So it's been about maybe 17 years since the designation, and really the challenges kept changing over the years. As you overcame the first set of challenges, then there was a second set of challenges and a third set of challenges. So in the first 5 years, the challenges were related mainly to educating stakeholders and community on what the values of the site were and how to safeguard them. There was no inventories or data. There was no stakeholder education. There was no site management know-how. And particularly difficult was how to protect living heritage, because the built heritage was protected by legislation, but still there was no technical or insufficient technical conservation knowledge and skills. So while these were being overcome, a second set of challenges came in, which was the boom. As the site became popular, there was a boom in property prices and, of course, a rise of gentrification. And unfortunately, because of the sale of properties, there was a lot of eviction going on, and the residential population started to dwindle, including the moving out of a second generation of residents, or the younger generation of residents. So this posed a threat, because it was very difficult to maintain the living heritage and cultural continuity. On top of that, the model of tourism that was adopted for Georgetown was mass tourism as opposed to cultural tourism. And this led to very quick commodification of culture. And also because of loose building use conservation implementation, a lot of commercial, residential and institutional properties were converted into hotels, Airbnb, shops and restaurants to kind of cater to the rising tourism. Now, while these were being attended to, we have in the last 3 years a third set of even more difficult challenges, which is very broad infrastructural development that is coming or being planned for the larger island of Penang, but which affects the World Heritage Site either directly or indirectly. And then, of course, issues of climate change, particularly because this heritage site is in a cape and it's affected by changes in sea currents, etc. And of course, the pandemic had a serious damaging effect on the economy, as the tourism economy, particularly. And the community was not able to really show resilience to the pandemic. They didn't have the kind of economic resilience to the pandemic. And also the local cultural ecosystem had almost died. So that didn't help the economy at all in the last couple of years. I'd like to highlight, for example, the impact of the pandemic on the business community. I think one of the learning points was that conservation really needs to shift its emphasis from protecting of material heritage to actually safeguarding the living community and their livelihood. So seeing only the tourism, seeing cultural heritage as only a tourism asset that brings economic capital is a bit one-sided. And I think cultural heritage needs to be seen more as a development asset, or a development asset that actually also builds social capital and social resilience, or the economic resilience of the people in terms of the skills that they have, how flexible they are in their management of their business, etc. Also, you can see in the two photographs there, the comparison of 2016 how active the site was in comparison to the 2020 pandemic situation when there was a lot of lockdowns. And we can also see in the graph below how unresilient the business community was, because their major issue was really cash flow and inability to manage financial management. Now, I also would like to highlight the challenge of a heritage site that sits in an urban area, because it's always open to extension of urban development, and certainly in Penang, infrastructure development planning is definitely going to impinge on the site. So there is an eastern seafront development that's being planned. You can see in the bottom right photograph, there are 4 parcels that have been highlighted for development. And these will definitely affect the whole idea of, viewing heritage as a landscape, because the historical coastal landscape, which is a very important part of the story of Georgetown, will now shift depending on the type of design that is going to happen in these parcels, whether they are incongruent or congruent with the historical landscape. And then there's also a very big transport master plan that has been put forward. And many of the lines, the LRT lines and the highways, actually lead into the World Heritage Site. So this is going to put a huge visitor pressure on the site. And this is a really small site. And on top of that, there's a tendency to look at zoning from a very hard point of view, like, okay, this is where the buffer zone ends, or this is where the boundary of the heritage site is. So we can build a station, a completely modern looking station right at the boundary, as you can see from the design proposal on the top right. So these are new issues that we have to deal with, including, of course, climate issues related to sea currents with these new seafront development, etc. So for my last conclusion, I would like to actually say that the OCNC Old Cities New Challenges course will actually introduce approaches, methodologies, tools, and techniques, new perspectives that look at more integrative, participatory, and sustainable conservation practices. And I think these new perspectives, which include the SDGs, the historical urban landscape, and also the new urban agenda, will give instructors added capacity, give participants added capacity to deal with these new challenges that have come up, in terms of urban expansion or urban intervention into heritage sites. And also the instructors themselves have quite a lot of experience in the region, and it's helpful because they've worked on the ground here and they can address the kind of local conservation issues and challenges that we face as developing countries. So I'll stop here and pass the session back to Jeff and the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jana. That was really wonderful. And I think you have laid out several of the new challenges that the old city of Georgetown is facing right now. And maybe it gives those of you in many other parts of the region a sense of how these challenges might resonate with the challenges that you're facing in your places. I'd like now to invite Dr. Yongtanit Pimonsathean, another of our wonderful teachers from our instructional team, who is a visiting associate professor in urban planning at Thammasat University in Bangkok. Yongtanit was trained as both an architect and urban planner and received a Doctor of Engineering from the degree from the University of Tokyo. Since 1994, he's been involved in several community-based heritage conservation projects, mainly in Thailand, from Phuket and Bangkok to Chiang Mai. And he was the first president of the ICOMOS Thailand chapter. He's currently a member of the National Committee for Conservation and Development of Ratanakosin in central Bangkok. And as he too is just a wonderful teacher, and it's wonderful to see you here, Yongtanit, and thanks so much for talking to us about Phuket and other issues in Thailand. So please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who is online. My presentation it's about Phuket. It's not really onto Phuket, but I'm going to do something also in relation to the currently Thailand's Old Towns program, where the Phuket is integrated in the system already, and I would end up with a challenges that we are facing right now in the area of conservation. Already Thailand and Phuket is very close to Penang, and both cities have shared more or less the same history during the 18th and 19th century. And Phuket, the size of the Phuket Old Town is just pretty much smaller than Georgetown, and it's like a neighborhood in Georgetown in Penang. The town was very famous for tin mining since the 18th and 19th century until the early 1980s. The decline of the tin trading has taken place, and but the tourism becomes more and more prominent in Phuket. In the very first stage, tourism in Phuket is much more on the marine tourism, resort beaches, and also golf courses. And the old town was not a tourist spot in the very first place. And below is a bit of the statistics before we have the pandemic. Phuket has a population of about 500,000. With the since it becomes very famous for tourism, international tourism mainly, there are about 150,000 expats working and doing business and living in Phuket. And as compared to the population, the visitors is much more bigger, like 15 million in the 2019, whereas the international tourism accounts for at least almost 10 million. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Phuket initiatives in heritage conservation. If you look at the timeline, the starting point of the awareness of the history of the Phuket town has been recognized in 1980s from the local people, and also from the people outside who's studying and working in the research and also in the universities. So we found a lot of research work in for a proposal for having Phuket as a conservation area. And I came to work in Phuket in early 1990s with the local-based program for conservation. And in the year 2000, we've got a good cooperation from the communities, and the community has been the major very active actors in the process of the conservation since the year 2000. And also now Phuket has been incorporated in the system of the what we call the Thai Old Towns program. In the very first place, we found that there are a lot of research and proposals, and thanks to the local people in Phuket, there's been a lot of studies from the what we call the Phuket Historic Interest Group. It's the local-based, local scholars' work that they have done a lot of work on the history, especially the old town, and also even older than that. And we've got also from this study from the international organization that they proposed one of the main streets of the Phuket town as the tourist spot. The pedestrianization was once in the very first place at that time in the late 1980s in the proposal of this report, as they are closing down the road and open for the walking street. The next development is in 1990s, where the local government has become very active in promoting the old town. At that time, the tourism was not really the main economic activity in the old Phuket town. It was the beaches and golf courses and marine tourism, as I said. But the starting point of the conservation program in Phuket is for the sake of the local community, is not for tourism, and it's very hard because in terms of economy and also in terms of the finance, it's very difficult to look at the budget allocation for helping the people who would like to preserve the buildings. And but I think the conservation program has been quite well in Phuket, and we found that in the year 2000 is a period of the rise of the community, and they forms diverse groups to link to the government's annual plan and the budget plan, and also to promote a different kind of culture in Phuket. And this was done through the establishment of the very, very diverse group from the local people. And the current development is we have in Thailand since 1999 the program called Thai Old Town. And it becomes, in the very first place, the first 10 years or 20 years was not that popular. But from, I think, the operation of the very first old town, it becomes very popular in terms of tourism, cultural tourism, and creative tourism also. Since in Thailand, most of the program in the old town, the main focus is to maintain the local residents in the area, not welcoming too much the externalities, the investment from the externalities. And but it still happens, and Phuket is also joined the Old Town program in quite recently. And the development of the old town has made also the town in the old town in Chiang Mai and also in Songkhla, the south that's close to Phuket. It has become very popular among tourists, especially the local tourists, and it's quite good as well when we ran the program of the Old Town. And according to the pandemic, the Old Town has somehow proved that they can do a better economic resilience. As you can see, since the beaches and also the resorts and the golf courses, according to the lockdown policy, it's very difficult for the management in the area. So the supply chain is more complicated, I think, to foster tourists to come to the area. But in the Old Town, I think the resilience can happen very easily, as we found that after the release of the lockdown, we see more visitors, more people in the Old Town, while the beaches area has still nobody's coming. We have still facing some challenges. I break down into two sides. The first one is the physical side, and the second one is the non-physical side. For the physical side, we still have a challenge in the local protection. In Thailand, the favor is given to the monument, the dead monument, through the monument law, while there is no such protection for the private buildings like the chop houses and also the old houses. The second one is since we don't have a very good system for the protection of the private buildings, here comes the problem of when you do the conservation, we have an issue of the authenticity in materials, authenticity in the design, and also the quality of the work. Yes, the same as Janet's slides, as we have in also in Thailand. I think it's common in Southeast Asian cities with the infrastructure development as a big threat to the conservation area. So we have both the subway construction, we have also the dam proposal and the high-speed rail, and also even widening the street. So there are all these challenge, I think, is pretty well perceived in Southeast Asia. And we are trying also to prepare some kind of the incentive for the conservation. And this is the attempt of the in Bangkok conservation area, and we have started the program for the air right transfer like 5 years ago, and now we have to do a lot more on the legislation and also the negotiation with the central government, and also the gentrification. It can be good or bad when we talk about the gentrification, but in this case, in Phuket, the investor from the outside just take advantage of the legal loophole in Phuket, and they build a bigger, taller, and non-compliance nature of buildings in Phuket, and this has been one of the talk of the town in Phuket, because the residents are in line of the protection of the heritage. So this is one thing that we are facing as well. And my last slide would be the knowledge transfer, as we are going to have the promotion of the conservation unit in the local authority. In Bangkok is the first place that we have the local conservation unit, and the challenge in this case is how to spread out the idea of the local conservation unit to other conservation area under either the Thai Old Town program or other locality who would like to preserve the heritage. And this, I think, is very important in Southeast Asia as well. And the course will help you as well to really comprehend the situation and also to solve the problem within the a universal framework of the conservation. And I think it would be a good opportunity to join the course. Thank you. And Jeff?
Yongtanit, thank you so much. You've covered a great deal of terrain in a very short period, and I appreciate very much the summary of this of these very complicated and long-standing issues. We're going to be moving now into several minutes of question and answers, and I'd like to begin with a question that came from one of the attendees, Saslin in Penang, who is posing this question to Janet. But I'd also be interested in, I'm going to add to this question. The question is, in your opinion, what are the challenges in convincing the local government that safeguarding the heritage assets are important in driving the economy of Georgetown?
I think just a quick answer. I think we have to. I think the government is already very convinced that heritage can drive the economy, but their narrow thinking is that tourism is the only way to drive the economy. So there is not enough expansion of what cultural heritage can do in terms of regeneration of urban areas, in terms of improving people's livelihoods, etc. So I think the issue here is really expanding the notion of how cultural heritage is a development asset, both on the social side as well as the economic side.
Thank you. Maybe we can stay with this issue of local government for a moment, and maybe I'll ask this question of Yongtanit because you mentioned several issues, several ways in which the local government in Phuket was taking a bottom-up approach to governance and to trying to include the community in making decisions. And I'm just wondering, what do you see as these different roles of local government versus the national government in terms of finding solutions to these issues?
Yeah, thanks. I think this is a matter of the partnership program, I think, established between the central government and the local government. What we have done now with that partnership is since you have to understand that in the very first place, the people in Thailand, they acknowledge the heritage is just only the dead monuments or the ancient monument but now they become to realize that their everyday life environment is a part of the heritage as well. So so for the ancient monument, I think the main responsibility is for the central government. But for what we call the living heritage, as Janet mentioned, and also the heritage of the everyday life, I think should be in line with the local government. But there's still some relationship between the central government and the local government. The first thing is the recognition of the central government, that is we are trying to do, that the Phuket, for instance, and Chiang Mai and also Songkhla is a part of the heritage at the national level. So this is what we have to convince, or we have to make clear with the central government in the very first place. And then we have to propose also what kind of establishment or what kind of programs or measures that the central government can offer to the local government. One example is now we are thinking about the taxation system. And the tax is now we have changed the property tax, the structures, and now it becomes pretty much depend on the estimated value or the assessed value of the property, and all the revenue from the tax would go to the local government. But the central government is to establish a kind of the framework for the calculation of the, in case if you have the incentive system for the tax reduction or the tax exemption. If you go to the local government, but the local government doesn't know anything about the tax calculation. So this is what the central government is going to prepare or to provide them. So this is just only one example of what we call the partnership program.
Thank you. There have been a couple of questions that have come in that center around the very critical issue that Janet and Yongtanit both mentioned, that is living heritage and involving the community. Mm-hmm. And one person is asking how the community could be taken as a rights holder and be put at the center of heritage conservation in both Georgetown and Phuket. And someone else has been asking, are there any, I mean, it's easy to be depressed about some of these challenges, but could you share perhaps some good practices in terms of engaging in community, in terms of centering their focus on living heritage? So maybe Janet, could you start with that?
Yeah, I'll just focus maybe on this, the concept of cultural mapping, and extend that to the idea of participatory mapping. Because a lot of times the community, because it's living within the heritage. So they're not, and also there are a lot of aspirations for, becoming modern, or, seeing modern buildings, or going for modern contemporary goods, etc. Contemporary, even technology, mechanization. So it's kind of important to involve community in the process of mapping their own heritage and actually verbalizing for themselves what they think is significant, even allowing them to do research into their own personal or community heritage. Because in the process of this mapping and research, they actually begin to develop an understanding first, and then a kind of they begin to see the value of that legacy to them. But I think it's also important to introduce to community how that legacy can continue in the future world. That means it's not something that's static. It can develop and be experimented with, and produce new goods or new ways of doing and thinking, as long as the value or the essence of that legacy is carried on. So yeah, I would say cultural mapping engages community and makes them aware of the value of, or allows them to be very clear what is of value to them and what they want to protect as time goes on.
Thank you, Janet. I just want to remind, sorry, Yongtanit, to interrupt, but I just want to remind everyone listening to this that this issue of cultural mapping is one of the modules that we'll be dealing with in the course, obviously building upon this extensive experience that Janet and Yongtanit have in actually working with the community. So Yongtanit, sorry, did you want to respond to that?
Yes, I think in the case of Thailand, mostly in Phuket, since the idea of the conservation starts within the community, but I think the challenge is they don't know just what to do, but they are the willingness to preserve their hometown is within the community already. So this is what I said, the knowledge transfer is one thing. And the other thing is, if you look at the some international recommendations like HUL, the historical landscape, and if you look in more detail on that, the recommendation in this document is there are 4 tools, and one of the very first tool is civic engagement. The civic engagement, they leave it open, but it depends on how to do it, I think, within a different context. And this is part of the, I think, one of the international framework that accept and also we're trying to promote the local community initiative in the conservation. And what we do in Phuket is in Thailand, the administration system at the local level is that we have what is called the community organization network. And before the community organization is mainly targeted for those who are underprivileged. It means the people in Phuket Old Town has less opportunity to join because they are the business person. They are considered, I think, too wealthy, perhaps, to join in the system. But things has changed, and since as I said in the slide, since the year 2000, the community organization has become a part of the official network in the local government administration. For instance, they have every month a very formal official meeting, and they can do a kind of the two-way communication between the community and also the government. So this establishment is a very good way, because the local government has to listen to the local people who are the taxpayer, and they have become more and more influential in the decision making of the local government right now.
Yeah, can I add to that?
Sure.
Because I saw one of the questions was like, how do you involve or how do you convince local authority and other stakeholders to also protect heritage? So going back to the issue of cultural mapping, when I say participatory mapping, I mean not only the community mapping, but actually involving the local authority in the mapping and local government agencies in the mapping process. And then I agree with Yongtanit. Once you do that collective mapping, it's very important to set up committees that maintain the relationship between the people who have been mapping. So between local authority, conservationists, and community. If you don't maintain some kind of formal committees, then it's very hard to go back to convincing them. So it's we call it a kind of a dialogical platform that you must keep alive throughout the whole period.
Right.
Well, thank you, both of you, for these important observations. I just want to reflect on one of the implications of some of what you've been talking about here, which is, and that relates to the course as well, which is that we need to have a very micro approach to the community, to the heritage assets and the living heritage that people are, as Janet said, are actually living with and living in. And at the same time, we have this dynamic between local government and local community organizations and local government and national government. And then Yongtanit reminded us of this historic urban landscape approach that we'll be using in the course, which comes from a sort of international context. And so one of the things I think that we're striving to do with the course is to give participants some tried and true methodologies and tools that have been working in some places, not universal recipes, but but being able to understand the importance of working at different scales, from the micro to the international. So I think that we're, just as we're getting rolling here, we're kind of running out of time. So I'm afraid that we're probably not going to be able to handle any more questions, but I want to thank both of you again. Janet, yes.
Yeah, I was going to address one question, a couple of questions that came up about the old generation and the new generation. So just very
quickly, yeah.
Yeah. I feel that conservation courses like this, it should be open to people who are working in heritage education as well. Because from our experience in Georgetown, running education, heritage education courses in partnership with the Heritage Office, Management Office, was really critical, because then we had a very good partnership between schools, Heritage Management Office, and the community. And the course, I mean, the kinds of hands-on, on the street kind of learning at the site for young people, interacting with the older generation, really managed to bridge a lot of transmission of culture in a more educational platform, as we lost more and more children who were actually living in the site. So I hope that answers two questions that had come up in the chat box.
Thank you so much. And again, I just want to thank both of you, and I look forward so much to working with you again on this wonderful course that we'll have in September. So I'm going to turn this back to my colleague, Duncan.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you to all three of you for being there today. A special thanks to Janet and Yongtanit for your very engaging and illustrative presentations, and also to you, Jeff, for moderating the session and getting the audience involved. Now, we're anticipating a really fascinating course, and so I look forward to seeing you three again in September. So I'd now like to talk a little bit about the course that we mentioned at the start of the webinar. As you can see, it's going to be running from September 11th until December 4th, which is about 12 weeks. And there are a couple of 1 week breaks during the middle of that. While the course is quite intense, we have recognized that you do have some other commitments, such as work or family. And this this will hopefully give you enough room to stay on top of those other commitments as well as the course. So the aims of the course are to improve the capacity of those working in heritage and conservation through providing a fuller understanding of conservation methodologies, and introduce some effective practical tools and techniques for the conservation of historic places in urban contexts. Now, our focus is Southeast Asia, specifically the countries of ASEAN. And we target anyone with a professional interest in urban conservation, such as architects, town planners, but also those working in related organizations. There might be city, state, or national governments, heritage trusts, or other similar bodies. This isn't a course for students, I will say that. We want to see a practical application of the tools so that we have the most impact on our historic neighborhoods. Now, I will say that this course is not for you if you're only half interested. It's going to be very interactive, as Jeff mentioned at the start. We're going to have live weekly tutorials, some group sessions, assignments, as well as a selection of recorded videos and readings that you will be able to watch in your own time. But you have to expect to commit at least 4 hours a week to this, and probably more. As with most things in life, the more you put in, the more you're going to get out of it. And this is very important. It is limited to those who are living and working in ASEAN countries, or you're currently working on a heritage conservation project based in ASEAN. Now, we're limiting this to 35 participants, and that's so that we can really have almost one-on-one sessions with people to make sure that it's a really worthwhile course for you. And we're going to be selecting participants based upon their previous experience and, crucially, how much impact we believe that they're going to have on their communities with their learnings. This is being taught by a panel of 8 instructors who are all recognized experts in their field, as well as being practitioners. And so it represents excellent value for money. Both the Getty and Think City are not-for-profit organizations, which allows us to keep the fees very low and well below cost. So the fees are $500 US, although a small number of scholarships will be available. And the application form is now available for you to download in the chat box. And you can see that the applications for everyone else will open on the 1st of June, which is Tuesday, and close at 6 p.m. Malaysia time, that's +8 GMT, on the 15th of July 2021. And also you may see that the other things that you can download are the 2 presentations from the speakers. So I'm going to say goodbye here. Thank you again to our speakers, Janet and Yongtanit, and also to Jeff for moderating the lively session. Thanks all to you who posted questions, and also for those of you who attended. I hope to see many of you at the course in September. If you don't have an interest, if it's not for you, I hope you can share it with friends or colleagues that you think might be interested. And more information can be found at the Getty website that you can see here, or at the Think City Institute website. And if you have any specific questions, you can send an email to me directly, and I'll try and respond to those as quickly as possible. I'm going to leave you now with a short video about the Getty Conservation Institute, so you can learn a little bit more about what they do. So until next time, stay safe, and if you can, stay at home.
There are a lot of organizations in the world that work to protect and preserve the world's cultural heritage, and we're one of them. But I think what we do is approach it somewhat differently than many. Our focus is the profession of people who practice conservation. One of our great privileges here is our ability to stick with a question for a long time, and how our resources and those of our partners come together to answer those questions. So we invest in research that allows people to have the best tools, the best knowledge, and the best practice. We're known for working in the field, but the reason we do that is not to conserve an object specifically, but it's to create a model of practice that can be demonstrated in that particular place, and that those results can be shared to other sites around the world. We invest a lot in science, and the point of that is not only to understand what works of art are made out of, why they deteriorate, but also to develop the most effective conservation strategies from that. We share the knowledge that comes out of the Conservation Institute through training and capacity building, so that the research that occurs here just doesn't end up on a shelf, but that it finds its way into the hands of people who practice conservation everywhere. In virtually everything we do it with partners. Partners who invest as much in the work, whether it's financially or intellectually, as we do. That way, the results are shared and owned by the field. The work we do with our colleagues around the world is an investment in the protection of the world's cultural heritage. So much of it is at risk, so much of it is being threatened, and without skilled hands, without the knowledge that colleagues have to protect it, it will disappear. And there's no better way, in my mind, than to arm a whole profession of people with the best skills and best knowledge possible for them to care for our shared cultural legacy.